Welcome to another episode of the Scary, Strange, and Paranormal. We are in October, and this is prime time for my scary podcast special. Um, every year I start putting them out around this time, September, October. So we're in the heat of it. This Halloween, I am doing a big Halloween special on here. My Halloween memories and more. So we're going to talk about growing up, costumes, costume parties, remembering as a kid, trick or treating. That's going to be the special. In that special, I'll also have some regular stories to tell. But today we got a big one. The Real Witch. This is a true story from me. All the stories on here are true and told, with truth. Everybody's going to be, a skeptic. Everybody's going to have an opinion, and that's good. That's fine. You're supposed to. Take it from me, or don't take it from me. Be your own judge with anything paranormal, because it's a big up in the air kind of conversation. You're not going to convince people that aren't convinced or that are a skeptic or, what do they call that? A disbeliever, but they like to debunk everything. And a lot of times it's warranted, but sometimes it's not. Here is a true story. My father had hunting land. He owned acres and acres of land that he used to hunt when we first moved up to northern New Jersey. We came from down south below Jersey. And, he just loved hunting. We took our quads, our four-wheelers, our dirt bikes. We hiked. This was land that we did everything on. And I'll tell you, this land had a lot of history. A lot of sightings of Bigfoot. Now, don't laugh. It's all true. But sightings of a lot of other things, including Native Americans, including people that were homeless. I don't know if I should use the word homeless, but they were strange people that lived in the woods. If you look up Jackson Whites, look that up. Not just them, but other groups of people. And some people were just hikers that would stay for a day or two. And then on their way. All right, the Appalachia Trail and the Iris Trail wasn't far. Long story short, one day we went there and we wanted to do a picnic. So, wound up happening, it didn't work out. Somebody got a call. Somebody else got a call. Somebody had an emergency. So my dad said to me, I'll tell you what, pack up, pack your cameras, do whatever, and I'll drop you off for the day. Hang out, enjoy it, walk around, hike. We had tree stands all set up. I said, that's fine, that's good. I got my phone, my medicine, emergency stuff, in case I had like a low sugar, a lunch, a cooler. And he dropped me off. I spent the whole day exploring, taking flowers, pictures, looking at deer. I saw a black bear. You ever get the feeling that somebody's nearby or somebody's watching you? Now I have this, and pretty much in my entire life, when I did have it, there was something. I had it this day. Now maybe because I was alone. I was doing my own thing, so you kind of have that, that worry. Or not worry, but just a feeling, you know what I mean? I mean, I'm fine. But feeling like somebody was watching it. So I turn around and I see a giant bobcat in the tree staring at me. Not far. Now, here's the thing, okay, where I live. Bobcats are not impossible to see or find. Even mountain lions. The state will disagree because they put them here. Um, but they're here. They're, I know many people that see them a lot, and many people that know about them. I've seen them. Um, whether it was to keep the rabbit population down, or maybe even coyotes, but we have them here. But we do have bobcat, and it it's not necessarily a thing that you'll see every day. It's still rare, but you can see a bobcat. My father's seen them many times during hunting season. Well, I saw one that day. I looked up. He was staring right at me, not scared of me at all. I'm getting ready to take a picture of this bobcat, and I hear the most blood curling scream I've ever heard. I freaking, I just jumped and flipped out. And then, of course, I look around and the bobcat's gone. But I'm not even thinking about him. I'm thinking, what the hell was that blood curling scream? However you want to call it. Terrifying is what I would call it. And I'm not like the scaredy cat kind of person, but I'm like, dude, what is that? The first people are like miles away, and it's like a farm. But I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm sure there's trespassers. We've had cameras all over. We got signs. We got posted signs. We got barbed wire. I actually made traps. What the hell was that? It sounded like a woman, like Lay Riona. So as I'm scared shitless, I go back to the clearing, which is the field, because 90% of it is like woods. Well, no, 90% of it's actually fields, but there are woods, deep woods. So I go to the clearing, like at the end of the day where my father would come to pick me up, or the hunters. We would all meet in one bottleneck area. I went back there and I'm like, dude, what the hell? I turn around and guess what's there? The bobcat. The bobcat looks at me and it takes off down the trail, back down the trail. I said, you little stinker. I said, you know what? I'm going to follow you. Well, he takes off, and about 10 minutes later, I call my father and tell him the story. He's like, wow. He's like, you should go, chase the bobcat, get some pictures. I says, yeah, but do you know like who that could have been? The scream? He goes, it could have been an animal. I said, you know what, Dad? I'm pretty good with that. I don't think it was. I think it was human. I think it was human. Whoa, he said. He said, are you sure it wasn't Rosie O'Donnell? I said possible, but I don't think it was. That would have been more like a pig-like sound, like a pig. Well, anyway, so I hear it, and it's in my head. Literally in my head. I hang up the phone and I start packing up my gear, and I'm walking down the trail to see if I could get caught up with this bobcat. Sure enough, I get to the same tree that I originally saw the bobcat, and I looked up. Only it was different this time. You know, you could tell a story vividly. Just know that I'll never forget this image for the rest of my life. I'm only explaining this story the best I can, but being there, what I saw was kind of traumatizing. I looked up and I saw the bobcat in the same spot with a woman next to him, an older woman. I would say in her 60s. Now, this wasn't that high up in a tree, but let's just put it to you this way. I had a stroke in 2018. I ain't getting up there. It was a decent amount. I mean, like, if you fell, you'd be getting hurt. You'd be breaking a leg. The woman was in the branch, like this, staring at me, just like this. Watch. The bobcat is staring at her, right next to her. And the freaking woman belted out a sound that for my entire rest of my life, I'll never forget the sound. I hauled ass. I hauled ass. I'm saying to myself, do I call my father and then he wants to put me in a home, like a mental hospital? Nobody's going to believe this. So, like, this is one of those things where you just have to keep it to yourself. Or later on down the line, years later, you're at a bar, you're drinking at a family outing, and you fucking tell somebody. Oh, boy. I get the nerve to go walk back. Now, mind you, it's going to be getting dark soon. I walk back. I walk back. And I get to that spot and nothing's there. Then I walk about a good 5 minutes past. So I'm a decent way into the woods. I'm about 15 minutes into the woods, give or take. The bobcat's nowhere to be found, but I see her hiding behind a tree looking at me. And she's got these raggedy clothes, like threads, like a wool, Native American looking. That's, to me, that's what she looked like. That or Peter Cush. But she had like almost like a Robert Redford skin. I don't know. But seriously, yeah, I felt like I was Jeremiah Johnson. She was very Native American. Absolutely. And she just stared at me, and so this is what I did. I said, "Okay, I'm leaving. Be well, be in peace, be safe. I'm leaving. If you can understand me." And she tilted her head like a dog, like she was listening. And then she hid behind the tree. Dude, I was done. I walked out. About 10 minutes later, my dad came to pick me up. And he said, "So?" I said, "You know what, Dad? I had the experience of a lifetime that I'll never have again. At least I hope I don't." And I did later that night tell him. And he said, "You know what, Sean? I believe you." He said, "That's really, really weird." Months and months later, I'm at a festival. I'm at a county local festival. It was what do you call that? Vendor meet. Like me and my mom used to do Etsy. We ran a business together, but we would do local events. So like a merch festival, jewelry, rocks, trading cards, clothing, hats, hand crochet, baked goods, you know. And we went to there was a booth there that year, and it was local lore, local history, um public records, stuff like that. And people were all talking. And I was looking at old yearbooks of like the town back in like the 20s. Anyway, long story short, I said something like, this is no lie, this is how it went down. I said, oh, the only thing I don't hear about in any of these books is a real witch running around. And somebody guy laughed. He was about, I would say he's about in his 70s. He laughed and he chuckled and he turned around to me and he said, "Oh yeah, real witch?" I said, "Yeah." And now listen to me. You could imagine what I was going through, what I was thinking when that event happened with the bobcat and all. And I was alone in the woods, listening to this woman not only scream, but looking directly at me, knowing that I was there. That feeling. How would you like to live that feeling again? Out of nowhere, within seconds. That same feeling. And he chuckled and he laughed and he goes, "A real witch, huh?" I says, "Yeah." He says, "I'll tell you a story." He says, "You can take it any way you want." He says, "The only real witch that I knew lived in this town for many years. And the last people that saw her, she was actually with a bobcat." Now, my blood curdled because I'm thinking, well, not only is this person describing what I saw, not only is he describing the part with the bobcat, but he's calling her a witch. Not a Native American, a witch. So I said to him, "Well, what makes you think that was a witch?" He says, "Because she was followed, she lived in a cabin, and they saw smoke coming from her house. And she had these giant metal cauldrons all over in the woods. Like she had been cooking something in them." And he said you could hear nothing but blood wrenching screams from the cabin. He says, and many local town folk have reported it through the years. I later went home. I told him the story, the guy. I told him. He was in absolute shock because he claims I was the last person to witness this. They thought she had been gone or passed away or moved. And it had only been months before this. They asked about the location and everything. I said, it's private property, but I'll tell you about where it was. We don't need a scene going there, you know what I mean? Like weird New Jersey, which I told about. I told them. Mark and Mark were like, whoa. And that's the story in a nutshell. But I later went home that day and I told my dad. And he's like, wow. He's like, what did he say? I said, all I know is he described it just like I remember. Even down to what she was wearing. Imagine the stench. Imagine living in the woods. That's creepy shit. Like, that's stuff that I would think, I would hear about on Clinton Road. But right in our own land. What do you think? Guys, what do you think about that? Did you ever have like a experience like that? I mean, yeah, you're not going to hear that every day. You're not going to hear a person describe something like I just did. Maybe I'm lucky to be alive. How do I didn't know she had a cult out there? Friends with a pet is a freaking wild bobcat. You know she must be feeding it. An experience, and I'm not gonna forget it, guys. The scary, strange, and paranormal. We're just starting with these stories, and they're all real. You gotta stay tuned. I got some more. I got some more that'll make your head spin. I'm gonna save it for another time. You know, I'll probably be telling this story to many people through the years. You know, I was telling it to one of my cousins a few months ago, and he said, "You know what, dude?" And it's funny, even now, when my dad goes or he gets out of a tree stand late at night and it's dark and he's getting down, he's looking over his shoulder. She never was seen again, at least in that area. Um, I mean, that I know of. You know, I was thinking about putting like a post up on Facebook or something and be like, dude, anybody that knows anything about this, contact me. Because if this guy is telling me that she was well known and I seen her, other people have to see her. It's has to, and she's sticking to the woods. You know, my dad went there a day or two after, and he's screaming. He's got like one of those intercom things, and he's like, "Anybody's here, you're gonna get for trespassing." I was like, "How do you know she even knows English or what you're saying?" You know, and we looked around, and you know what's weird? We didn't find one trace. Um, well, I shouldn't say that because in that area we have trees that are knocked down from hurricanes and they have the roots under them. And people have made domes with sticks using that as a backing of the house and lived in there. And they raked it out and we found fruit, like apple cores, banana peels. Like, dude, and to this day we don't know who it was. Multiple ones. Like they made campsites out of the bottoms of trees and old rotted out wood. And some of them are perfectly raked. But you know what's weird about the whole thing? No footprints or handprints at all. Guys, the scary, strange, and paranormal. I'll see you on the next episode. Let me know in the comments below what you think about all this. Take care.